All right, let's dive right into this explainer and decode a powerful, entirely legitimate tax strategy for small business owners. We're talking about a very specific method for shifting pre-tax business dollars straight into tax-free personal income. Now, this is a maneuver that's often misunderstood, and yet sometimes abused. But listen, when it's executed with absolute precision, it is an incredibly potent tool to have in your entrepreneurial toolkit.
We know you're savvy operators, so we're not going to waste your time today. We're using a structured playbook. First, we'll meet the Augusta Rule. Second, we'll outline the exact tax code framework. Third, we'll walk through executing the strategy. Fourth, we'll show you how to bulletproof your documentation. And finally, we'll cover the common traps you absolutely need to avoid. Let's get into it.
Section 1, Meet the Augusta Rule, Origins and Opportunities. So where did this actually come from? Well, it got its colloquial name because, historically, residents living near the famous Augusta National Golf Club would rent out their personal homes to people attending the Masters tournament. And because of a very specific carve-out in the tax code, those homeowners were legally able to pocket all of that rental income entirely tax-free.
Now, for modern business owners, this historical quirk translates into a brilliant, two-sided strategic play. You're essentially renting your own home to your own business for legitimate meetings, retreats, or offsites. Think of it like this. On side A, your business, like your S-Corp or C-Corp, deducts the rent as an ordinary business expense. On side B, you, the homeowner, receive that exact same rent completely tax-free on your personal return. It's a perfectly clean shift of funds, provided you follow the rules to the letter.
Moving right along to Section 2, the tax code framework. Anchoring the strategy in law. To make sure you know this isn't just some sketchy internet tax hack, we've got to anchor our strategy in the stark reality of the Internal Revenue Code. We aren't relying on loopholes here. We are relying on written, black and white statutes.
The absolute bedrock of this strategy is Internal Revenue Code Section 280A. This is the section that governs home office and vacation home rules. And the core rule here is incredibly clear. If you use a dwelling unit as your personal residence and you rent it out for fewer than 15 days during the entire year, zero rental income is included in your gross income. The income is literally just ignored for tax purposes. You don't report it as income, and correspondingly, you don't deduct the rental expenses.
But here's the catch. For your business to legally deduct that rent in the first place, it has to meet the strict criteria of a totally different section, IRC Section 162. This dictates that business expenses must be, quote, ordinary and necessary. So in the context of the Augusta Rule, this means you can't just casually declare your living room a boardroom for the day and write yourself a fat check. No way. There has to be a legitimate, real-world business purpose for the rental. The rent paid must be at fair market value, and the whole thing must be rigorously documented.
Okay, Section 3, Executing the Strategy, the step-by-step playbook. Let's transition over to the actual mechanics and see how all this legal theory builds into an actionable, chronological sequence that you can execute in your own business.
It's a precise 6-step choreography to ensure this is treated as a totally legitimate transaction. Step 1. Identify a real meeting, like a major strategy session, a formal board meeting, or an annual planning retreat that you would otherwise have to pay a hotel to host. Step 2. Research comparable rental rates for a similar space in your local area. Step 3. Actually sign a written rental agreement between you and your business. Step 4. Hold the actual meeting and take real minutes. Step 5. The business formally pays you. And finally, Step 6. The business deducts the expense and you claim the exclusion. Boom. Done.
Next up, Section 4, Bulletproofing your documentation, the paper trail and proof. You can kind of think of this as the eat your vegetables part of the explainer, but we're going to make it painless. Your entire strategy lives and dies on meticulous paperwork. Because if the IRS comes knocking, let's be real, they don't care about your good intentions, they only care about what's in your files.
The single largest audit risk with this strategy? Fabricated or totally inflated daily rates. You can't just charge your business thousands and thousands of dollars a day for a standard suburban home just because you set up a whiteboard in the den. So, we have to ask the critical question, how exactly do you defend your pricing? How do you prove fair market value?
Well, you prove it by building what's called a comparability research file. You use real-world data. Go look at the rates for actual hotel conference rooms, or co-working platforms like Peerspace, or even local boutique event spaces. Actually capture screenshots of what it costs to rent those spaces for a day in your specific zip code. You're aiming for a defensible rate that falls somewhere right in the middle of that range.
You definitely don't need to pick the cheapest option, but you absolutely shouldn't pick the most expensive outlier either. So what goes into that defensible transaction file? Every single one of these items. A written rental agreement is completely non-negotiable. Remember, you and your business are separate legal entities. You're also going to need the meeting agenda, the official minutes, and an attendee list with their business titles. You absolutely need those 3 to 5 fair market value comps we just talked about. You need a clear, physical paper trail of the payment, like a cleared business check or an ACH transfer receipt. And depending on your exact setup, your business might actually need to issue a Form 1099 MISC to you as the homeowner if the rent goes over $600. Doing that creates a perfectly clean audit trail.
All right, Section 5. Common traps to avoid, failure modes. Before you go rushing out to implement this today, we need to highlight the severe failure modes. These are the classic missteps that will cause an auditor to disallow your deduction on the spot and potentially hit you with some hefty penalties.
14. That is your magic number, and it is a hard cumulative cap for the entire year. Remember, it's the 14-day rule, not the 15-day rule. If you rent out your property for 15 or more days in a single calendar year, suddenly all of that rental income becomes fully taxable and some very complex allocation rules kick in. And here's the real kicker that catches a lot of people out. This limit includes your personal Airbnb rentals. If you rent your house out on Airbnb for 10 days while you're away on vacation, guess what? You only have 4 days left for the Augusta Rule strategy that year.
On top of that, your entity structure is literally everything here. You cannot legally rent to yourself. If you operate as a sole proprietorship or a single-member LLC that's taxed as a disregarded entity, the federal government considers you and the business to be the exact same taxpayer. So this strategy fails before it even starts. You must have a legally separate business entity that files its own tax return, like an S-Corp, a C-Corp, or a partnership to pull this off. Oh, and one final warning. Phantom meetings, they fail. Calling something a board meeting when there's no actual agenda, no real decisions being made, and no real business purpose will completely collapse under any kind of scrutiny.
Honestly, it all comes down to this one simple truth. Treat it as a paperwork exercise, it works. Treat it as a magic trick, it gets disallowed. This isn't some secret, shadowy loophole, it's a statute. So respect the law, do your rigorous comparability research, maintain pristine paperwork, and please, avoid the magical thinking that you can just write yourself a business check just for existing in your own house.
So before a single dollar moves between your accounts, you need to sit down and consult your tax professional. Have them verify your specific entity structure, have them review your fair market value research, and ensure your documentation templates are entirely in order. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. As a business owner, how many other legally sound, rigorously documented tax strategies are you currently leaving on the table just because you haven't taken the time to build the right playbook? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.